Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us as part of Florida Climate Week. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Zach Lowell. I'm with the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. And I'm here with my colleagues as part of Clean Energy Generations, Access in the Eyes of Boomers, Gen Xers, Millennials, and Gen Z. A little bit about our panelists today. We have Susan Eber, she's Senior Manager of Apprenticeship Programs, Carlos Lopez, Program Director of our Puerto Rico initiatives, Toya Callahan, Vice President of our local initiatives, and Rashida Roy, Program Manager on the local initiatives team. It's kind of fitting, so each of them represents a different generation, and I'm at the tail end of millennial or the beginning end of Gen Z, so I'm sort of in the middle of two generations, and I'm the moderator. So thank you all for joining us. A little bit about the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. We are a national nonprofit that works to increase the benefits of renewable energy and energy efficiency to benefit people, the economy, and our planet. We work in three complementary pathways, the first being workforce development. As clean energy jobs open up, how do we make sure that people are there and ready to fill those jobs? And also, how do we make sure that everyone can access the benefits of those jobs? And so that's our workforce development side of things. On local clean energy solutions, that's another big area of focus. A lot of work goes on at the local level with cities, counties, regional organizations, using policy tools and other initiatives to drive the growth of clean energy, increase resilience, and create new jobs. And third, we have our regulatory engagement. We work on national regulatory policy, particularly around issues surrounding interconnection and resolving interconnection pipelines and other things like that. So if you'd like to support the transition to clean energy, we are working state by state to create an equitable foundation for affordable renewable energy. We are developing practical guides, toolkits, and other resources to inform policy and investment decisions. And we're growing a diverse workforce for clean energy technologies through training standards, best practices, and inclusive programs. So you can scan the QR code there to learn more and to support our work. And lastly, if you'd like to stay in the loop and keep in touch with us, here are two more QR codes to subscribe to our newsletter, visit the website, and you can also find us on social media. And I'll return to this slide later in case you miss it now. So now it is my pleasure, and I'm excited to pass it off to the first of our speakers, Susan.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks. Well, welcome everybody. I'm here to represent my generation being the boomer generation. And I think that that slide is very appropriate for those of you that don't know. That's what records looked like. 45s they were called. And one of my favorite one was What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. Great song, still relevant today. Next slide, please. So here's some images and of memories of growing up. We had phones that were hung on the wall with very long cords that you could wrap around the house so that you could have a private conversation with your friend that your parents couldn't hear. Of course, you can see from the middle picture lots going on there in our generation. And I'm going to talk a little bit about things that I don't think people remember is we had gas rationing for a couple of years, even in odd license plates. So there were certain days that you could get gas and certain days you couldn't. And also, we are the beginning of the Earth Day movement. And finally, music. And I will just tell you that the picture on the bottom there, that is me in the middle doing my Grace Slick imitation. Uh, Very much into music, and I believe, contrary to many others, that our generation had some really good music. Next. So what were some of the influences? As I was putting this slide together, and with everything that's going on today, I was reflecting back to things that happened when I was growing up. They say that things that happened during your formative years of middle school really affect the way that you look at the world as an adult. I've done a lot of training in adolescent development, and that's very true. So as I looked at the political events, we had the Civil Rights Act in 1974, the Equal Opportunity Act, the Vietnam War. We wore bracelets that were for prisoners of war with their names on them, hoping that they would come back. I had friends whose brothers died in the war. With the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Cold War, we were taught to hide underneath our desks or by our lockers in the event of a nuclear war, that they would find our bodies. We had the assassination of political leaders. In a span of 5 years, a president, two historically awesome civil rights leaders, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and then finally a presidential candidate, Bobby Kennedy, were assassinated. We had the moon landing, and of course, Watergate, which taught us a lot of lessons about, do we really know what's going on? Uh, Economic events, we had the Equal Credit Opportunity event. Prior to that, women could not secure a credit card on their own. People that were Black and brown had a very hard time, very difficult time getting credit. So because of that, I'm able to own a house today and have credit. And yeah, and post-war two, World War II consumerism took off. And I don't know if that's always a good thing. A lot of suburban growth. And of course, as I mentioned, the gas and oil crisis. Our key cultural shifts, which really affect today, is the counterculture and the social movements that were started during those years. The boomer years took place from 1946 to 1964, by the way. The first Earth Day was in 1970, which we still celebrate today. The sexual revolution, of course, the Stonewall uprising in 69, which really affected many of my friends in the way that they're able to live their life today. And then, of course, the defining technology and media at the time was television and newspapers. You waited for the newspaper every morning to get the news. And then, of course, music. Next slide. I believe that chaos can be transformative, and I know that many of us really feel like we're living in chaotic times today. But as someone who has lived through from the boomer years, who has come through all these generations, I will tell you it can be transformative and there is hope. And so I want to just give some insights and perspective on some of the environmental issues that shaped the way that I think about the environment today and why I'm here at IREC. There's the hidden cost of unchecked industrial growth. The lesson that we've learned is that economic policy must be balanced with environmental stewardship to ensure long-term public health and sustainability. The power of whistleblowing, scientific whistleblowing, one of the most important and influential whistleblowers that was a boomer was Erin Brockovich. So if you've seen the movie, you know what she did to transform her community. Rachel Carson wrote The Silent Spring in 1962, which really connected environmental problems and showed that they're interconnected and they can be complex. We also learned that environment is a public health issue, that protecting the environment is inseparable from our public health and the quality of our life. And then finally, the one we deal with, but I think it's important to remember, is the challenge of consumption and waste. Um, Sustainability really requires that we monitor how we consume and how we deal with our waste. Um, Fundamental shift happened, but I believe it needs to continue to happen. Next slide, please. So my other bandwagon I'd like to jump onto is workforce. And I think that for me, what we learned and what I learned during my growing years was the power of public investment in human capital. The GI Bill came about during my time, and that's probably been one of the most influential benefits to our veterans, and it's helped to really provide education as they transition from the military into citizenship. So there are other pieces, the access to higher education, of course, being one of them. The inevitability of workforce mobility. You know, back in the day, I can remember my father having a job. He had the same job for all those years. When he retired, he got the gold pocket watch. As I've watched things have progressed over the years, it, that's not always the case anymore. And we need to focus not on teaching one single skill, but on building a, a foundation of transferable skills that allow workers to pivot, especially as we move forward into the future and look at all of the emerging occupations that are coming about. Tension drives innovation and policy. Certainly, those social movements that I witnessed in my lifetime began to dictate economic priorities. We began to see Clean Air Act, and we began to see, you know, good things coming out of diversity, you know, providing diversity in the workforce, an emphasis on clean energy. But I think it also shows us that long-term consequences of short-term policies. Today's workforce must think generationally. We need to think of the legacy and we need to figure out how our workforce can move into the future. How can we prepare young people for the things that were going to happen? Cybersecurity didn't exist when I was in my young years there, and now here it is. Who would have thought? And along with many of the other AI and all of the other technology. So we need to really think what we need 30 years down the line. Next slide. That is why I am such a big believer in registered apprenticeships. And that's why I'm here at IREC. You know, apprenticeship unions understood the value of training. The apprenticeship started in the 19th century, 1940s, and mostly it was construction and trades. And thank goodness for them because we have a lot of our infrastructure to thank for those unions and the work that they did. They take good care of their people. They do an amazing job and they know how to train and they know how to train for the future. So registered apprenticeships began to blossom and open up in 2007 under President Obama as he began to see that they were something that could be sustained for other sectors. So they're industry led, they're on the job training going from 2,000 to 8,000 hours depending on the occupation. One of my favorite pieces, however, is the mentoring, that relationship piece that's teaching somebody how to do something in a one-on-one situation. That is precious, and that's probably why the biggest reasons why I like registered apprenticeship, the consistent on-the-job training and that mentoring. There's also related instruction. So that's the theory that exists to help the apprentice in their on-the-job training, and that's paid for the employer. It's about 144 hours per year of the apprenticeship. But here's the other thing, increased wages with increased skill. So we've all probably been in those jobs where we're thinking, when is that raise coming? When am I getting that raise? Am I going to get that raise? There's not a lot of guessing with registered apprenticeships because it is a very prescribed wage increase. As you learn your skills, you gain a higher wage. And with that, there's also increase for career pathways. Next slide. So I'm going to quickly run through this. I am a resident of Florida, and I've set up apprenticeships here. And I can tell you that the clean energy employment grew by 5.9% in 2023, more than twice the overall rate job growth in the state. EV jobs have increased by nearly 18% over 2 years. We are in serious need of EV technicians. We are in need of EV stations, people that put those stations in place, monitor them, and the technicians that fix our cars and our vehicles. Lots of us know that if you look out the window or drive down the street, you'll see EV buses and hybrid buses. Those need to be maintained. Quickly, I'll wrap up here. Occupations in clean energy include the power producers like the solar and the wind, the grid and infrastructure, the energy efficiency and building performance, those resource savers, the things that keep the air conditioning in your house. Technology and data, those data scientists that are looking at the data and crunching it. Of course, the technical support and project management. And the one that I'm really excited about that I'm seeing a lot of K through 12 programs look at in both pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs, that is the sustainability specialist. Next slide, please. So if you're ready to invest, this was a very quick overview, but if you're ready to invest in a stronger, more skilled energy workforce, IREC is here to help you. We are continuing our work in the Apprenticeship and Clean Energy Network, thanks to our support from Investment in the Future. Little QR code there that you can link on and get more information. But in closing, what I want to say is the greatest lesson from the boomer years is that we cannot afford to work in silos. We cannot afford to work in silos neither generationally or industrially. And the challenge for us today is to ensure our passion for clean energy is matched by the durability of our workforce development infrastructures. We can't afford another Silent Spring moment in our economy. We must ensure our talent pipeline now. Thank you. And now to Carlos.
That's awesome, Susan. Thank you very much. Okay, so as it says there, my generation, Generation X, raised on hose water and neglect. Well, raised on hose water, it was really sort of my fountain of youth after I've always been an athlete. So after every single basketball or baseball game with my childhood friends, we would sort of sneak into the front yard of the closest house and drink hose water to our heart's content, right? Or until the owner of the house came out screaming to leave their hoses alone. But in other serious matters, hydration was important, but in other serious matters, the late 80s and early 90s really made the link between social justice and environmental issues. And this emerging field of environmental and energy justice really spoke to me. Next slide, please. Some images to sort of set the tone. Of course, Gen X is also known as the MTV generation. The first time that music was set to video, and who can forget the video of Thriller? On a personal level, I basically lived outside the home with my friends. That picture there is me, the kid with a white shirt. It wasn't until my mom called about 10 times the dinner was ready that I wanted to get back into the house. Of course, the personal computer was becoming more affordable and more accessible. And there's that big old clunker that many of us from my generation had in our desk. And if you can see from the Atari console, it was sort of the modest beginning of the gaming generation, right? With the complicated games of Pac-Man and Centipede and paddle tennis. Next slide, please. Now, shifting on now to the discussion at hand about clean energy, let me sort of share with you the insights and perspectives I developed early on in my formal education. One, energy has limits. The activism that Susan spoke about of the 60s and 70s gave rise to established science that we cannot assume a forever growth in energy consumption, and I learned that early on in my formal education. A second insight, interdisciplinary is key. Energy matters and energy issues are not just engineering and are not just technical concerns. It is certainly not the realm of just engineers. There are environmental, social, economics, community justice, and political aspects to all energy decisions. Three, a word that we now use so much, but clearly I didn't call it silos back in the 90s, but I understood the concept. Silos missed the mark. Collaboration is key. For example, in the racism and environmental degradation, we know that they share common root causes. During that period of time, there were in-depth studies and areas of development that environmental racism and energy justice were terms that were first coined and collaborations were fostered. And I participated in some of those efforts. Fourth, you have to communicate, or it's important communication, the relevance of the work that you do. If the work that you do really excites you, you have to learn communication skills to tell others. There's a bit of a salesmanship for the sake of education and the betterment of society. Five, clean energy is the route. Clean energy is not necessarily the destination. If we're talking about quality of life and the betterment of society, well, with clean energy comes resource sustainability, comes economic justice, comes energy justice, community participation, responsible governance, and responsible corporations, all of which are components of a better society. Six insider perspective that I want to share with you that sort of shaped my professional development is prioritizing and planning is a must. In order for the transition to clean energy to work, market forces alone cannot be the determining factor. If we do it that way, we'd see that it's going to leave too many barriers affecting equitable adoption in different socioeconomic levels. Next slide, please. The first opportunity that I got to incorporate all these learnings and perspectives into a project was right after Hurricane Maria, in a community that had been without power for 3 months in Puerto Rico. I failed to mention that I'm addressing you from San Juan, Puerto Rico. I initiated collaborations with nonprofits and faith-based groups to bring energy education to hundreds of people in that community, hundreds of people at a time. We convinced them to plan the community resilience from the perspective of community needs. And the first project that was allowed and financed was an energy resilient hub with a particular prioritization of needs and community agreements for its use. This effort would result in the community organizing a leadership structure and became Puerto Rico's first energy cooperative called Pirucho Power. In that community, there are 750 homes, so they have plenty of work to do over the next few years. Next slide, please. In 2023, I was entrusted and challenged, if you will, by the Secretary of Energy herself and in collaboration with the University of Puerto Rico, Maya West, to develop in a very community participatory manner 10 energy resilient hubs for last mile economic vulnerable communities in Puerto Rico. Granted, we had done one in Caguas, and now it was our challenge or our responsibility to expand that tenfold, if you will. We set to do that in October 2023 and quickly signed up 5 communities located in rural areas impacted by years of bad electric service and other socioeconomic vulnerabilities. Next slide, please. 1 year later, we had the first batch of installations completed. But what was really more important to me is that I didn't have really an idea of the level of engagement and ownership that we would receive from those communities. They had volunteered as energy teams, dividing up responsibilities between technical aspects, liaisons with the rest of the community, leadership with the municipalities in order to obtain permits, etc. El Nuevo Dia is, as you can tell from that Puerto Rico's largest newspaper, covered our efforts in a front cover article to commemorate the 7th anniversary of Hurricane Maria and to highlight how these community-led initiatives could provide a good roadmap for how to build resilience to other sectors of Puerto Rico. Next slide, please. And now, as we fast forward to the end of the second year, just recently completed in September of 2025, our result is that we have resilient hubs in 10 communities and last mile areas with economic, social, and electrical system vulnerabilities. Another result is that we've been able to develop 10 energy groups or 10 energy teams, really, composed of 3 to 7 community members with leadership and with stewardship responsibilities over those systems that were installed. And I think even more importantly is that we have solid 5-year service and maintenance agreements in all of those communities to ensure the long-term optimization of the resilience centers that were installed. Next slide, please. And in some closing thoughts, here's, to hoping that we can repeat this process. We did one community, then tenfold, and here's to hoping that we can do it 100th-fold. No, there was a study done in Puerto Rico that some 750 communities qualify as vulnerable. So moving forward on 100 of them would really make a difference. As I look at that bigger project, if you will, perhaps of 100 communities, there are some economic spin-offs or economic benefits that I like to quickly share with you. This project would cost about $7 million to scale it up to about 100 communities. It's estimated that it would be a 5-year project with the possibility of creating certainly over 75 jobs based on the experience that we had with one community, then 10 communities. And clearly we believe in behind a resilience infrastructure at community level with a solid service and leadership plan for the next 2 decades. In terms of institutional inertia, that is how difficult it would be to, for example, interconnect these projects. Resilient hubs are small enough that they would really not cause any interconnection related concerns. I do recognize that these projects will need local government partnerships, as we did the previous 10 with academia, nonprofits, and the federal government. And then to sort of address some social factors and technical challenges, I would just say, for context, and here's what's really interesting, Puerto Rico's electrical grid was the showcase and the gemstone of electrification efforts from the 60s and the 80s. It is an absolute technical fact. They achieved 100% electrification for the whole population. However, since 2014, and under the bankruptcies restructuring since 2017, currently it is the worst performing, tanking the economy and depopulating Puerto Rico. So clearly projects like this would be a magnet, would be a draw for economic development and to bring back a highly skilled technical population to Puerto Rico. And I would say sort of the only technical challenge is that some of the community serving facilities, that is the community centers, may not be solar ready in structure and sort of electrical code for installations because, of course, they're located in economic disadvantaged areas. Next slide, please. And if you like to participate, help, ideas, fund, invest, there's our information. And I look forward to answering any questions that you may have. Take it away, Toya and Millennial.
Great. Thank you so much, Carlos. Good morning, everyone. So glad you're here to attend this webinar with us. And so I'll be giving you the perspective from a millennial and tell you about the turn of the millennium. Next slide. So as a teenager living in Africa, I remember the craze around Y2K globally. And so Y2K refers to the historical year and the 2000 computer bug. This bug was a potential technical glitch caused by earlier computer systems storing the year with only the last 2 digits, which would have caused a ton of malfunctions as the year turned from 99 to 00 or 00. And so the problem was in the earlier days of computing, to save memory, programmers used only 2-digit years. So for instance, 98 was represented 1998 instead of using 4 digits. And so as the year 2000 approached, there was a concern that computers would actually misinterpret 00 as for 1900 instead of 2000, which would lead to widespread system failures in critical infrastructure like banking, utilities, and manufacturing. So massive efforts around the world were put together to fix the code and really, ensure that there weren't widespread disasters. The event actually prompted a global push to update computer systems, and some of the Retail outlets like Best Buy warned people, you must turn your computer off as as it hit midnight in the year 1999. So luckily, there weren't a lot of issues because countries and organizations around the world really tried to update their computer systems to address the problem. And actually, the former US President Bill Clinton organized efforts to minimize the damage in the US, labeling Y2K as the first challenge of the 21st century that had been successfully met. So on the other hand, for the general public, there's a bit of a lack of clarity regarding the potential dangers of the bug. So some people really saw this as an apocalypse, and they went out and stocked up on food and water and purchased firearms and purchased backup generators and took out a lot of money in anticipation of apocalypse. And so as you can see on the right, a man is stacking up water at a local Walmart, and I actually think this is in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm actually in Memphis, Tennessee right now. So and so there were a lot of theories around the world that the world was actually coming to an end. And so as 2000 hit the next day, we were still alive. There were definitely some glitches, but as I mentioned earlier, world organizations and governments addressed the problem in time. Next slide. So on a lighter note, I mean, this slide just brings up so many memories for me as a teenager and begging my parents to get the newest gadgets. So on a lighter note, this slide shows the technology and how that has changed over time. So for cell phones, you can see on the left, we had that's the Nokia phone, and it was quite bulky. And there was some sort of like antenna on the top, which I don't even think I don't think you could pull it up. I think it was just there for some sort of purpose, but not actually a pullout. And then you can see that we then had a flip phone, that was probably one of the best things that I loved, the flip phone. And then my personal favorite was the other phone with the keyboard, and you were able to just type out. And so things did change, and now we mostly use touchscreen phones. As Carlos pointed out, yes, we had that heavy, bulky computer that came in the uniform eggshell color. And so in the 2000s, you started to see, computers evolve, and there were more slick and lighter computers that had a more flat screen. As for music, oh boy. For some of you who remember, we had the Walkman, which was a cassette player, and sometimes the tape would jam and you'd have to pull it out and roll the tape back in. And we then went to a Discman, which allowed you to play CDs of your choice. Of course, if you were done with the CD, you had to switch over and find another CD to play. And then Apple came out with different versions and sizes of the iPod. And so you can see, I don't even remember all the names for this, but I know for sure I was one of those people saying, Mom, I want the next iPod. So trying to keep up with technology. So next slide. So I also want to just talk about solar, which is something that I'm extremely passionate about in my career. And I've seen how this has really evolved over time, and it has helped, a lot of people across the world have access to clean energy. I specifically do work in the US. IREC is a US-based organization. It's a national nonprofit, as Zach mentioned earlier, and my work is specifically around helping local governments streamline their processes and making sure that their constituents have access to clean energy. And so I'm not going to go over the entirety of what is on the screen because there is a lot that has happened over the years, but I will just focus on what has happened after the events after 1999. And so you can see in 2005, the investment tax credit was created. In 2007, solar became the leading renewable energy technology across the globe as for clean energy. And then in 2012 to 2015, residential solar systems actually became more affordable. And so on the next slide, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about, you know, the cost, the division of costs with solar. Next slide. So even with, 2012, 2015 saying that residential solar systems became more affordable, yes, they did. However, with this change a decade later, there are still factors that still drive up the cost of solar. And solar, yes, it is one of the cleanest forms of one of the cheapest forms of clean energy. It does have soft costs related to it. And so these are non-hardware expenses of our solar system. And this would be permitting, financing, customer acquisition, and administration costs. And these are actually the larger portion of the total cost of an installed system. This actually amounts to about 65% of the total cost of the solar system. And so it causes a lot of issues in terms of being able to deploy solar across the country. And so soft costs really drive up that price, the overall price. So we're trying to help, the IREC is trying to help local governments across the country to really streamline those soft costs so it becomes more affordable for their constituents to go solar. Next slide. And so I wanted to mention a program that has been doing this for years. The program is called SolSmart. This is a national technical assistance and designation program that helps local governments across the country to streamline those processes that I mentioned. So permitting, planning and zoning, inspection, interconnection. And so we provide technical assistance to local governments across the country, regardless of their size. So you could be a town, a village, a county, a city, and still be able to take advantage of this technical assistance. And so if I was giving this presentation maybe a few weeks ago, I would have done it differently. But this program, unfortunately, has lost its funding. And the funding did come from the U.S. Department of Energy. This is part of the funding that has been terminated by the U.S. Department of Energy. And I will stress that the cancellation of the funding has nothing to do with the performance of the program. I'll share a little bit more about how much we've actually done to work with governments, local governments across the country, and actually specifically Florida. So if you could turn to the next slide, Zach. So SolSmart has worked with over 30 jurisdictions in Florida. And actually, I have been part of quite a bit of this, probably working with half of the communities on this list. And so we've worked with them to streamline their permitting, their inspection and planning and zoning. And this actual work has helped local governments address key issues in their zoning that include aesthetics, setbacks, glare, and many of the topics that are really specific to Florida, some of the challenges that are specific to Florida. So I'm really proud to say that we have 36 communities that have been part of the program, have received designation and recognition, which really means that we've worked with them on set technical assistance, and then they've been able to receive recognition for their efforts to streamline the processes that I had mentioned earlier. Next slide. So the city of Orlando is one of SolSmart's gold designated communities, meaning they have a 3-day turnaround time or even potentially less on residential solar permits. And Orlando is one that I wanted to just showcase for this presentation because they have done innovative things to support solar. They partnered with a local nonprofit, Solar and Energy Local Fund, to make solar and other sustainable home improvements more affordable and accessible to underserved communities. And they did this by providing innovative financing options. And so this, to me, has been a really great example of how a city can take a big step to support their residents and make sure that they actually have access to solar. In addition to providing technical assistance, the SolSmart program also recognizes all these communities. And so Typically, we have a celebration for them. This is also a good opportunity for them to get some press out of it, and it publicizes their commitment to ensuring that there's more solar deployment in their communities. And so I also wanted just to close out and say that the program, the SoulSmart program, has worked with over 500 jurisdictions across the country. And we have 100 communities, over 100 communities that are seeking technical assistance as of today. And I mentioned earlier, yes, our funding has been cut. We have to halt our work right now, which leaves us in a situation where we still want to continue this work, but unfortunately, we don't have the funding to do so. And so we have a really robust infrastructure to keep this work going. We've invested a lot of time and effort over the years. So we're seeking funding to continue this great work. Next slide, Zach. And so if you're out there in the audience and you want to partner with us on SoulSmart to keep the momentum going, keep the good work going, here is my information. And I really look forward to the Q&A session, and thank you so much for listening. I'll turn it over to you, Rashida.
Thank you, Toya. Hi, everyone. My name is Rashida Roy. I am a program manager with the local initiatives team at IREC, and I will be talking about Generation Z, also sometimes called Zoomers, in pursuit of a clean energy future. Next slide. So thinking of Gen Z, there are some distinct characteristics that come to mind for me. For one, we are the first generation of true digital natives. This means that we've had access to computers and high-speed internet, as well as social media from a young age. The cutoff years for Gen Z are usually seen as 97 to 2007. So the introduction of the iPhone in 2007 came when Oh, sorry. Until 2012. That was wrong. So the introduction of the iPhone in 2007 came when older Gen Z like myself were in elementary school and younger ones weren't born yet. So for me, my first smartphone came in high school, but for others, they may have been playing or watching videos on their parents' phones as a kid. And with that constant access to news and information and individualized social media algorithms from so young, it certainly shapes your way of thinking and rewires your brain, often influencing the issues we care most about. Next slide. In my case, it gave me early exposure to the impacts of climate change, and with that heightened climate anxiety. A notable moment for my generation came with the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, which happened either when we were in college or high school or even middle school. And that certainly shaped how I viewed my future and career, as it was also tied to the threat of climate change. And the digital nature also made it easier to mobilize, I think, and to learn about and join movements. And we see that in how passionate Gen Z is about social justice issues and advocacy at an intersectional level. And this includes climate activism, which advocates for an immediate phase out of fossil fuel extraction, and with that, a transition to clean energy that is accessible for all. Next slide. To expand a bit on the accessible for all statement and the justice angle, I want to tie in my particular climate story. So I'm from Bangladesh, which has been a lower middle income country since 2015 following rapid economic development. But as a child, I saw extreme poverty firsthand, and I learned as an adult that those same communities were most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, despite bearing no role or contribution really to climate change. And many Floridians are familiar with the impacts of sea level rise and how that can permanently alter the land and agriculture of a place over time, which then impacts food and water supply as well as the health of all residents. Um, In particular for Bangladesh, projections show that between 10 to 18% of it will be underwater by 2050, which would displace millions of people there. And all of that is why I decided to pursue a career in climate. Next slide. Another place I consider home is Mississippi, where I grew up and attended K through 12, the foundation of my life. And through my climate studies later, I realized that Bangladesh and Mississippi weren't so different. Both have swaths of rural land and delta regions shaped by their rivers. Mississippi is also resource limited and often overlooked in these conversations in the past of clean energy and climate solutions. It's also one of the poorest states in the US, so many residents experience high energy bills and energy poverty. So I decided I would adopt this mindset of thinking globally and acting locally to impact the communities closest to me. Next slide. A bit on renewable energy in Mississippi. So these projects are a growing portion of Mississippi's um, energy market. Recent data from this year shows it makes up over 6% of utility scale net electricity generation in the state. And this growth has happened mostly in the last few years. And this tiny map here shows 44 projects that are either existing in construction or approved throughout the state. And the regions with these projects are seeing many benefits associated with renewables. It, of course, reduces carbon emissions and increases resilience and reliability through diversification of the grid. But the greatest benefit to these communities is the economic development that renewable energy poses in the form of increased tax revenue through incentives. And this also directly empowers those local communities, whether it be through the school districts getting more funds or other public institutions. So next slide. And by acting locally in my career, I found myself supporting this program through IREC, that is based in Mississippi. The Reliable Energy Siting through Technical Engagement and Planning Program, or RSTEP, is initiated by the U.S. Department of Energy, and it aims to enhance the decision-making capacity of the state as well as local governments in planning, siting, permitting, various processes related to large-scale renewable energy projects. Our state's collaborative consists of our partners are the Mississippi Development Authority, IREC, of course, Mississippi State University's Extension Center, and Efficient Power and Light Advisors. Together, all of us partners, we um, are hoping to streamline processes and ensure equitable benefits of renewable energy throughout Mississippi for the various communities in the state. Some work that we've already begun. So one of the pillars is technical assistance and education. And one thing that we already developed is a guidance document on developing a wind energy ordinance. This is particularly targeting a county that came to us that was seeking unbiased information on wind energy and steps that they could take um, to be more informed on their energy decisions. We are also developing a renewable energy playbook, which would be a comprehensive guide outlining best practices and strategies in solar, wind, battery storage, geothermal, all of them, in the state of Mississippi. And also another pillar is stakeholder engagement. We have, the last couple months since this project began, we've been conducting various interviews with developers and local government officials, as well as other regional organizations or the Mississippi Public Service Commission. And most recently, just yesterday, actually, we attended an in-person conference held by the Mississippi Association of Supervisors, where we had really fruitful interviews with group interviews with counties from throughout the state, whether that be the coast, the Delta region, the Northeast, counties with various degrees of um, renewable energy development in place. Sometimes they don't have land use, and that also alters what assistance they are in need of and what information we should provide. So these interviews have also been really key in informing us for this playbook that we're developing. And another pillar that once this playbook is developed, will be hosting webinars, workshops, and an online resource center that all of these counties can access for years after the development of this playbook. Next slide. So that is the conclusion of my presentation. Just wanted to thank everyone and pass it on to Zach.
Well, thank you to our speakers and thank you to all of you for joining us today. It's really a pleasure to just hear all your stories about different generations and clean energy through the years. To those of you viewing at Florida Climate Week, we would love to stay in touch. Again, here you can visit our website, learn more about some of the projects you learned about, including our work in Puerto Rico, the Soul Smart program, registered apprenticeships, and the R-STEP work underway in Mississippi. We do have a lot of resources that are free and available to use for the general public. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, we do post regular updates on social media and in our monthly newsletter. So we'd love to keep in touch with you all. Now, we do have some time for a Q&A session, and we'd love to hear just your thoughts and your questions for the panelists. So I see the first one we have here. It's actually, I think, for Carlos, but it really could be answered by anyone. Which is kind of what is the biggest potential for clean energy in the coming years in Puerto Rico for resilience, but then I think for everyone else just across the country.
Well, thank you, Zach. So I'll take a first crack at it and then go from there. I think looking forward, what the market looks like in Puerto Rico or potential in Puerto Rico, I think are those pockets that haven't been served by solar over the past decade. There's been a robust growth of solar in Puerto Rico. We've gone from maybe 20,000 rooftops installed by 2012 to 165,000 rooftops in Puerto Rico out of the total 1.4 million rooftops there are. But if you look at the socioeconomic demographics of it, clearly the folks on the lower socioeconomic end have not been able to participate. And I'm sure it's the same for many other jurisdictions. So I think an opportunity is to make sure that solar growth is equitable across all socioeconomic levels. And I would just add, in Puerto Rico, there's a lot of folks that live in condominiums, apartment buildings, and they haven't, obviously, because of lack of rooftop area, they haven't been able to develop. So I would say community solar for via subscription for folks who live in those sort of households, apartments and condominiums, so that they can have virtual net metering. I think those are two distinct opportunities.
Zach, I can add to that, just on the local government perspective. I think there's a lot of opportunity with local governments and communities. I think there's, you know, keeping the momentum around clean energy is really important. Looking at the economic benefits around clean energy. As Rashida just mentioned, we were in Mississippi, and you know, hearing about some of the generational differences between you know, land that's left to a new generation that is not necessarily wanting to use that land for farming, and being able to use it for solar as a new way of making money. And so looking at those innovative ways to still keep renewable energy front and center, because it is so important and it is so crucial to have that access to renewable energy, especially, with disruptions, grid disruptions, and other situations that would find vulnerable communities without access to clean energy.
Thank you, Tola and Carlos. We have a question here. It says, with the reduction in funding to support solar growth and project support, what are you seeing on the ground now in terms of the impacts of growth and installations? Thoughts on the future of the industry and how to adjust strategies, approach, and funding to keep things moving forward? And that's to everyone. It's not specified toward a single person.
Yeah, I just want to pitch in here and say one of the things that I think we need to think about and we need to educate ourselves is many of us have become very comfortable using AI, and I don't think you realize how much energy AI takes. And so that we really didn't have this conversation, but I'm seeing a lot of it in the workforce training that I'm doing, that companies are wanting to expand into AI, and that AI takes energy. And so it is really important that we strategically look at how we're procuring that energy, renewing that energy, sustaining that energy. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in a real pickle trying to figure out how to accommodate artificial intelligence.
Zach, if nobody else, let me add a couple of thoughts also on that last question. Puerto Rico has really become an interesting dynamic laboratory because of what happened after Hurricane Maria. As you know, the grid was destroyed. People didn't have power. The earliest community that got power was 2 weeks. The latest community that got power was 11 months. So think about going 11 months without electricity. It's mind-numbing, right? So the adoption of distributed batteries and storage has been like no other market anywhere. There's 2.5 gigawatt hours of distributed storage across Puerto Rico. And it's been used over the past year or so, half a year or so, for virtual power plants. So when there is a possibility of a grid outage, some of the storage, some of the stored electricity in some of these distributed batteries are put into play so as to shore up the strength and the robustness of the grid. I suspect if that is mirrored and that is copied in other jurisdictions, we'll be able to have better performing grids all over the place.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something just from the local government perspective as well. I think our strategy really is to stay nimble and be able to really listen to the needs of the community. We understand that no size fits all. So a community that is looking at wind turbines and then neighboring communities looking at solar farms, we have to be able to understand that these are different approaches. There might be community resistance. So really trying to figure out how do we equip these communities or local governments with the tools that they need to keep interest and investment in renewable energy in their communities. And so those are some of the strategies that we're looking at, recognizing that it really differs across the country and we have to stay informed and ready to pivot when needed.
Great. Well, y'all, we have about a minute left, so we've got two questions here that I'm going to combine into one. So it's sort of a two-parter then. One, what do we see as kind of the next generation and the next generation's focus in terms of climate? And then the second is looking at where humanity is today and giving everyone's thoughts and journeys. Do you feel like we're making progress?
Well, I've lived long enough to see the good, bad, and the ugly. And so I'm a firm optimist. And as I said, out of chaos comes opportunity. And I think IRAC, as a very forward-thinking organization, is always looking at what opportunities can we maximize. So I will say that. I would say that I am enormously hopeful and just really happy to be working with a lot of these community-based organizations that are doing on-the-ground work in their communities and working with young people, everyone from K through 12, and community gardens, and just really raising thoughtful young people so that we can see this level of anxiety diminish, because certainly that is not good. And I see great things for workforce in the future. We'll get through it.
Yeah, and if I may add, I mean, I just look at this panel today. We're all from different generations, but we're all fighting the same cause. And so I think really being able to unite those generations, because we can all learn from each other and continue collaborating and having a joint fight towards climate change and clean energy is the way to go.
I would just add, there's a lot of progress going on internationally. I think if we look beyond our border, our geographical border, we'll see a lot of progress in many different areas. Just in this panel alone, Rajija is from Bangladesh, Toya is from Africa, I'm from Puerto Rico. So there's a lot of diversity here, and I think that diversity is also going to bring strength as we move forward.
And I'll also add just a final note that I agree, but also within the geographical borders of the US even, as like sometimes on the broad level, the impacts do seem to be affect my ability to stay optimistic, but then I do come in contact with these local communities in Mississippi, or like Susan mentioned, community-based organizations that are doing work and making real progress even at a small scale. And I think that actually makes a huge difference, especially when it's all looked at in one lens. So I feel hopeful as well.
Well, thank you all. That's a great note to end on. I know we are a little over time, but thank you again to everyone who joined us today. Thank you to the Volo Foundation, and thank you to just everyone who's helped organize Florida Climate Week. It's been a pleasure to join you. Take care.